Well, Dean Rice is our latest guest on Unpluggered. Plenty of players that we've spoken to on this podcast or across the journey have made the transition from Carlton to St Kilda, but there are only a handful that went the other way. Certainly in the 80s, it was famous for St Kilda picking up a lot of ex-Carlton players, but the likes of Dean Rice and Matthew Lappin moved on from St Kilda and had successful careers at Carlton as well. But he played 234 games and basically 50-50, 116 with the Saints and 118 with the Blues, which included a premiership in 1995, was a part of a St Kilda team that charged to the finals in 91. Dean Rice, thank you very much for your time.
No worries, guys.
Now, your journey started at a very similar time at St Kilda to a lot of great players. Your first year was 87 in terms of playing senior footy. That would be Nathan Burke's first year, Stuart Lowe's second year. Robert Harvey would debut the year after. Nicky Winmar started at the club. Plugger would win at Brownlow. Exciting time to come to the club, obviously with a club legend in Darryl Baldock at the helm as well.
Yeah, no, it was a long time ago. It's hard to get the memories up. But, yeah, no, it was. It was a time when I guess in St Kilda years prior were struggling. I think they won a lot of wooden spoons in a row, and I know that at the time I went there, they were pretty desperate for some success, and they brought Darryl Baldock over from Tasmania to try and get that success. And, the coming years they recruited pretty well. And I actually remember the first game. Nicky Winmar played the same first game for us. It was round 1, 1987, so a long time ago.
Dean, what was your youth footy like growing up? Because your uncle played and captained Geelong.
Yeah.
And so you had kind of VFL footy was in your blood. Were you a Geelong fan growing up? And what was that pathway like for you getting to St Kilda?
No, I actually barracked for St Kilda as a kid. So my grandfather on my mum's side was a big St Kilda fan, and he got me barracking for St Kilda when I was young. A lot of my junior footy with my school, because I went to Salesian College in Chadstone. I started my juniors at a club called Essex Heights, which used to be a link to Richmond, because that was Richmond's zone back in those days. But my teenage years, I played all my junior footy with the school. From there, I played 1 year of senior footy as a 16-year-old with my brother up at Longwood in the Benalla and District Football League. My brother was in the army, and he coached them and convinced my dad at the time, because I was doing my HSC, to go up there and play that year with Longwood, and we actually won the premiership. From there, I went down to Geelong because of those links with my uncle to play 1 year in under-19s and reserves in 1986, and lived with Gary Hocking in those days down in Geelong. Which was interesting days. We got to do a bit of mischief down there, and they decided at the end of that year to try and split us up and let me go and kept Gary Hocking, and I ended up going to St Kilda in 87.
So, being a St Kilda fan, did you get to many games at Moorabbin growing up? And then how was that transition going from being into stands to going out in the field and going, oh, hey, I'm out of here now? How was that feeling from there?
Yeah, my dad was a journalist. So my dad actually worked for the Sporting Globe and the Sunday Press and all those papers in the old days. And so he covered football. He was a football journalist. So I used to go to the football with him wherever he went, and he'd get the odd St Kilda game, which was at Moorabbin. And he was a little bit concerned at times because he had to be in the press box, and didn't like leaving me out my own at St Kilda, that's for sure. And I remember the day, even though St Kilda, from when I was growing up, weren't that successful. So I remember the Trevor Barkers and those sort of players who were playing before I joined St Kilda. And when I did join St Kilda, it was definitely a highlight to actually even train with those sort of guys when I barracked from.
Yes, as you say, St Kilda had won 4 wooden spoons in a row. You've come in, you played 20 games in your first year, including 18 in a row to finish the season. St Kilda won 5 in a row and got on a great run late that year, a run they hadn't gone on for a while. there are plenty of great highlights at Moorabbin historically, but Plugger kicking his 100th goal in '87 would have certainly been one of them. And you were on the ground playing in that game against Footscray. Can you sort of take us through what that was like? The club had a bit of momentum at Moorabbin, and Plugger's obviously going ballistic that day.
Yeah. The memory I have of that day, obviously, it was I think it was a pretty good game, so it was pretty close all day, and we ended up winning the game. But Plugger kicking his 100th goal, and I remember standing out in the ground. That's when people come streaming onto the ground. I remember one of the Footscray supporters bumped a few of us on the way past just to try and get us fired up a bit. I remember that when they actually ran out, but it was pretty spectacular to be on the ground when someone actually kicks their 100th goal in an AFL game. So it's definitely a highlight of my career watching that.
We know the parties sort of happened down there in Moorabbin a fair bit during the 80s and that sort of thing, and then Plugger goes and wins the Brownlow. How did Moorabbin go after that, or was it not? Did nothing really happen down there afterwards, or did you see a few interesting things happening after with celebrations?
Not specifically with Plugger winning the Brownlow, because we didn't play finals, so a lot of the guys dispersed when the Brownlow was on, so they'd be travelling all over the place. But I remember when you win games down at Moorabbin in those early days, that and probably a cultural thing, and probably hampered us in the end, that you win a game, it was like winning a premiership. So you go up to such a club after the game, and if you're one of the better players that would get a vote, they'd get you up on the stage in front of the crowd and announce you. And it was like trying to you couldn't get in. You had to go around the back because it was just so packed after a win, and they'd be celebrating all day, all night, all Sunday, all Monday. And by the time the game come around, we're sort of we're still celebrating the game that we won previously.
Just on Plugger, I guess. I mean, you were a pretty kind of powerful wingman. I remember you kind of streaming up and down the wing, but you would have kicked a fair few, I guess, goal assists to the big boy in the goal square. What was he like to play with?
Yeah, well, he was probably the most influential player that I ever played footy with. He was the sort of player that could win a game of football, and you don't really have those players anymore where it's more of a team thing, where back in those days you just put it up the Plugger and you count on Plugger kicking 10, 12 every week. It's funny you actually mentioned that, because I got two younger boys. I got three boys. Two of them are fairly still pretty young. They're 10 and 13, and they pulled out the videos the other week on YouTube, and we're watching some of them, and I was commenting to them that Plugger kicked over 1,000 goals, and the amount of times I kicked him, I reckon I helped him with about 500 of them.
There was I was actually watching a game on YouTube earlier today from '91 against Brisbane. I think he kicked 5 points that day. Plugger kicked 10 goals, but '91. So you only missed 5 games over about 5 years. You were basically instantly established in that best 22. That the side gradually built, and when Ken Sheldon took over, they showed some promise in 1990. But '91, you played a fair bit of footy forward early in the year. Obviously, when Plugger was out, you kicked 5 in round 1 against Richmond. That transition, you sort of played a pretty important role. I think it was you, Russell Morris, and Stuart Lowe that sort of carried the forward line in Plugger's absence.
Yeah, I can't remember why Plugger wasn't playing, but he was either
back in a practice game against West Coast at Waverley.
Did he? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my role changed from the wing to go forward. I think I was changing on the ball too at the time with Danny Craven. Yeah, so that year, predominantly that's the way I played, and then I think Plugger came back on the side in the later rounds, sort of 8 or 9 or something like that. I think I probably kicked 20, 30 goals that year. Probably one of the years that I kicked my most goals in my whole career. So yeah, it was an interesting time, especially without Plugger, but when Plugger come back, it was just sort of get out of the way and let Plugger do all the work.
As Darren said, I guess by then you'd kind of established yourself as a really key member of the team, and that kind of happened straight away. Did you envisage that happening so quickly? Because I think by 89, 90, you were kind of already in state, in rep team conversation and playing for Victoria. So how did you see that transition from you being a young kid to all of a sudden being maybe not a walk-up start, but really being a key member of the senior squad?
Yeah, just back in those days, you're playing the game because you love it and you're passionate about it, and you want team success, and you never really thought about yourself all that much. You just went out and did the job, and you believed in what you could do, and I guess that's confidence in yourself and your abilities, and you never really think about should I be here or shouldn't I be here. You're just there doing a job, and hopefully your team has success.
Sheldon was the coach around about that time of another St Kilda Carlton crossover there, and had a little bit of a run-in with another St Kilda Carlton crossover in Craig Davenport at one point. Did you have any situations where he sort of pulled you over and had a bit of a chat or bit of motivation, I guess, to then go out and do something that turned the game, or just gave, I guess, a bit of a motive?
Yeah, I had a few run-ins with Kenny. Kenny was interesting. He obviously got the best out of players, or most players anyway. He had an interesting way of going about it. It was always going to be tough for Kenny because he transitioned from a player to a coach straight away. So a lot of the players that he was coaching were actually players he played with. And I think to get players respect, I think he went at times over the top. And in the end was one of the catalysts why I left St Kilda.
You say that he's one of the catalysts of why he left St Kilda, but what was that period like? What was the change from, I guess, that late 80s to the 91 season when all of a sudden things started to fall into place and come together, and all of a sudden for the first time in donkey's years we're playing finals footy? What was the change?
I guess we had a pretty talented side. There were some players that played around that era to become legends of the footy club. But to Ken's credit too, you've got to take your hat off to him that he really challenged the players and he pushed the players, and he probably didn't find that happy medium where you challenge players and you push them, but at the same time you've got to get their respect and get to understand them too, or who they are, because everyone's not the same. And I think he just pushed them a bit too far, and I guess that's why in the end when he had a lot of success for St Kilda, which hadn't much success, to the next year being sacked as a coach, because I think he lost the players by the way he went about it.
He played 105 games in 5 years and then played 11 in the next 3, obviously as a result of significant injuries. Can you sort of take us through that end of 91 into 92 and obviously how that came, unfortunately, unstuck physically?
Yeah, so to the start of 92, in a pre-season game against Geelong and against the guy that I used to live with, Gary Hocking, he went to smother the ball and come across my knee, and so I did my knee at the start of 92, so I missed the whole of 92 and then came back in 93. I probably didn't come back in the show. No, I worked pretty hard. It was always tough because I never ever, as you mentioned a few times, I played 105 games straight for St Kilda and hadn't missed much footy, and then to miss a whole year and to get back to play in 93, it was always challenging to get to the right shape. And then 93 come around, I was in and out of the side. And then, I had a bit of running with Kenny and on the training track, which, was unfortunate, and it didn't turn out too well for me. And we had a few words, and after that, I never played a senior game for St Kilda again. So
So was your mind made up at that point? I mean, Ken Sheldon would be sacked at the end of that very season. So was there any time for you to almost sort of say, well, he's gone, so I might stay? Or was it all made up well and truly before that point, and there was no going back?
Once Kenny moved on, I was pretty committed to the club. Stan took over. Stan was actually the fitness coach for St Kilda prior to him getting the senior job. So he worked under Ken for a couple of years, so he knew the circumstances and what happened with Ken. And I remember at the start of '94 pre-season, it was the end of my contract, and St Kilda wouldn't sign me up. I guess they had some concerns about my knee, and '93 wasn't a fantastic year. And I said to them, well, if you're not going to sign me on a contract, how do you expect me to do a pre-season? And, if I get injured, I'm not covered or anything like that. And so I stood out of training for a couple of weeks, and my manager at the time ended up getting an injury indemnity form, which is obviously not around anymore, but that just covered me from if I did get injured, that I'd be covered under a contract of some shape or form. And unfortunately, the start of '94 in a pre-season game when Stan was coaching, I got injured in a practice match down at Warrnambool at Koroit against Essendon, and I hurt my good knee in an accident. At the time, it was pretty upsetting, and I thought I'd be gone again for the whole year. I thought I did my other knee, but I got the news that I'd only be out for 6 to 8 weeks, and I guess St Kilda in the end and Stan used that as a reason to tell me that we no longer wanted you anymore and we're letting you go.
I guess before we touch on your time at Carlton and how that panned out, it'd probably be remiss of us not to talk on the '91 final series. I mean, like we said before, it's kind of the first time in forever that the Saints had played finals. And for you as a St Kilda supporter growing up, what was that experience like? And I guess specifically, I'd like to hear your memories of that '91 elimination final against Geelong.
Yeah, no, it was massive. I remember the training session leading up to it, like there would have been a couple of thousand people at training watching. St Kilda had been starved success, so there was a lot of buzz, a lot of enthusiasm around the club. We had a fairly successful year. I think we finished 4th out of 6 teams, and the system that was set up back in those days were third played 4th, and the loser went straight out. But the winner was a huge carrot because they got to play in the second semi the next week. So it was all nothing. And I remember running out at Waverley, and it was a packed crowd, and St Kilda hadn't played in too many packed crowds. So it was electric. It was exciting, and we were 5 goals up at half time and looking like we were going to beat Geelong, and in the end it didn't quite happen. I remember with about 2 or 3 minutes to go that I had the last shot for goal. I was running into in front of an open goal. I actually missed, put us 7 points down. If I kicked it, we would have been 2 points down with 2 or 3 minutes to go. So that sticks with me I'll keep bringing that up a few times. But that was unfortunate because if we'd beaten Geelong at that, we would have played in the second semi against Hawthorn, and we'd beaten Hawthorn earlier in the year. And, you sort of have woods over teams. You play well against teams, and, Geelong we hadn't beaten, and Hawthorn we had. So, you look back on now, if we won that game, we probably would have gone close to playing in a grand final or even going close to winning it. So, with the players that we had in our team.
Yeah, it's a good point. It was the worst final system probably ever created, that final 6, and it only lasted a few years. But you're a little hard on yourself. I remember the shot. You say open goal. You were 51 metres out, so a little harsh. But H, you're up.
I was going to also say we had I think a bit of the wood over the West Coast at that point as well. So that was that would have been nice to have come up against them too.
Yeah.
your time at the club, is there anyone you would say that you sort of gravitated to and they had a fair influence on the time you were at the club, and you sort of looked at and went, yeah, I want to sort of stick to them and take everything off them I can?
Yeah, not necessarily that that I thought I was going to follow. I was pretty blasé about the way I went. I just played. I never really thought. I just thought that I belonged. As I said, you have your self confidence, but the players that you were close to. I was pretty close with Dean Gregg. I remember Lawrence Bingham at the time. I was pretty close with Plugger because I grew up. I didn't grow up, but I was living in Dever Hills at the time with my partner at that time, and I remember Plugger was living in Dever Meadows or Cranbourne, and we used to travel to training together all the time and travel to games. When we played in the state, we'd drive to the airport. So he had a big influence on me too, and but there's no one I really actually looked at him and thought, I need to be like that type of player.
So 94, we don't talk about Carlton too much on the pod, but we'll touch on them a little bit. But obviously 94, you're at Carlton, you do the knee again. Take us through that, and then obviously returning in 95 and winning a flag. I guess that full circle where I guess you're probably facing career mortality when you do a knee for the second time, and then you come back and win a premiership. Can you, I guess, take us through that resolution?
Yeah. So I ended up leaving St Kilda at the start of 94. Back in those days, they had a pre-season draft, which was held in the end of February and March. So for all of those delisted players that did get delisted, had an opportunity to be drafted into another club, and I was picked up by Carlton. I ended up playing my first game for Carlton. I can't remember, round 5 or round 6 against Richmond at the MCG. I was going all right at the time. Again, someone fell across my knee, and I knew straight away that I did it, because I experienced it before. And I remember sitting on the bench. It was just before half time, thinking, "Yep, that's it. It's all over. 2 knees. Not too many people to come back from 2 knees back in those days." But Carlton were fantastic to me, and David Parkin. I remember he came out to me and said, "Look, you're going to get every opportunity to get yourself up." Lucky I was playing right at the time. I think that helped me to survive and give me an opportunity. And that was all the motivation I needed, was that someone would believe in me and give me that opportunity, because I'd been through it 2 years prior. I knew exactly what I needed to do and what I should do and what I shouldn't do, and got myself pretty fit, and ended up playing the premiership in 95, which you look back thinking all the injuries that you had 92 and 94, and that probably led you to and opened the door for winning a premiership in 95. So there's always a positive out of a negative.
I guess outside of the obvious in winning a flag at Carlton, but what were the major differences that you found at Carlton compared to your previous time at St Kilda?
Yeah, I guess it was just culture. We talked earlier about St Kilda, and you win a game and you'd be celebrating for a while. Whereas at Carlton, I remember it sticks in my mind how the different cultures was. The start of 94, when I first came to the club, it was in March, and they held a jumper presentation at the end of March to all the players. And I remember John Elliott getting up in front of the whole club, big crowd, all their sponsors, all their supporters, and just lambasting the whole club about finishing second the year prior when they got beaten by Essendon in 93, and just telling everyone that second's not good enough. If you're not up to it, we'll let you go. We'll get people that want to be around the club and want to play. And I was just thinking at the time that if St Kilda had finished second, they'd probably celebrate that for the next 10 years, not get up in front and just say to the club that's not good enough. And that was the difference between a winning culture and what the culture that St Kilda had. And I guess to a point, Carlton's probably lost that now over the years, where their culture is not the same as it was back then. But that was the difference in those days between Carlton and St Kilda.
Going forward a few years, and your son's coming up for draft.
Yeah.
He had the choice between both Carlton and St Kilda, and it was sort of no one knew which way he was going to go with. Did you have much influence over where he decided to go, or you just basically said to him, "Nope, your decision. You can completely take whatever you want," or did he come to you for any advice of what he should do?
Yeah, we talked about it. Mine, because he's a Carlton supporter as a kid, obviously, because that's all he remembers. I was at Carlton when he was born, and my impression was that he was always going to Carlton. He did a father and son program at Carlton, but St Kilda, to their credit, at the time with Alan Richardson and Tony Elshaw, who was the recruiting guy, they did a fantastic effort in convincing Barley that St Kilda was the club to go to, because they were always there. They looked after him. They got him to do work experience at the club. Alan Richardson would offer Barley that, because Barley was playing TSC at the time with the Stingrays, that come in, we'll have a look at your video and we'll go through it. And, they sold a great package to Barley, and West Carlton were always interested. And Sauce was the recruiting guy at the time, and I had a relationship with Sauce. And I think in the end it was Barley's decision. I remember him ringing me from the draft camp and just saying, "I've made my decision." I thought, well, hang on, mate, we really haven't talked about it. And he decided then that St Kilda was the club, and he felt comfortable there. It was closer to home. If he had to go to Carlton, he probably would have had to leave home and live with someone or be in a house or whatever it was. Whereas at St Kilda, it was just down the road. It wasn't too far away, and you could go there, and that's why he chose St Kilda.
So Bailey spent a couple of years at the club and is now over in the States playing a different type of football. Can you tell us about his time in the States and what he's up to now?
Yeah, he left in 2019. He was pretty disillusioned with footy at the time. And there were a number of reasons for that, and I won't go into too much about that. But Bailey decided to go down the line. He always had a passion for American sports. He'd been over to America a few times as 14, 15, 16-year-old before the AFL. Then when he was going away with a few Saints players, he'd go to America with them, and just decided that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go and punt and get into a university. He had a relationship with Aaron Sipos, the next St Kilda player, who was at Auburn University. When he went over with Rowan Marshall on a footy trip, he stayed with Aaron Sipos for a week there and experienced what their lifestyle was and what Aaron was doing, and decided that's what he wanted to do. And he joined up with a company called the Punt Factory. The coach of that program, I actually coached as a player when I was coaching local footy after I left AFL. So I had a relationship. He's actually, the talent manager for the Oakley Chargers too at the same time, Jai Bond. So he went down that ride, did a 6 months program with them, and then to Barley's credit, he worked pretty hard and got a full scholarship to North Carolina University in America, and he went over the start of this year in January, and he's been there for 8 months now, 7 months.
And the final question before we let you go is a two-parter, and I appreciate your time. I guess one, what's your relationship, I guess, across with both sides now? Do you watch a fair bit of sort of St Kilda and Carlton? Obviously, it sounds like the breakdown between your relationship with St Kilda wasn't great, but have you sort of come back around to the point where there's still a place for them in your heart alongside Carlton? And I guess the second part before we let you go, I know you played State of Origin in the early 90s. I think you would have been playing in a game in WA, the famous Ted Whitten stuck it right up game. I guess what that experience was like being a part of Ted Whitten's Victoria.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Victorian thing. That when when he mentioned that was against South Australia, at Footy Park, and I didn't actually play that game. I was actually in the coach's box for that game. Me and Danny Frawley and I were in the coach's box. We didn't make the final cut, so they got us to sit in the coach's box, and Billy Goggin was the coach at the time, and Teddy was a fantastic character, and I knew Teddy because through my dad, who was a journalist, they had a relationship. But it was something that I loved doing anyway, representing the state and being involved with that, and that was the next level up from AFL footy or VFL footy back in those days. That you're playing against the best players in Australia, and it was a great experience. I played 3 games for Victoria, or 2 games, and that game there that I sat in the coach's box, and that'll stick with me forever. That was a great experience for me. In regards to AFL footy, I don't really watch it much anymore. I've got both teams. I've got it in my heart. There's no things happen in footy across your career, and you take the goods with the bads. And St Kilda were fantastic when I was there, and they were fantastic to Bailey when Bailey was there. And there are things that happen across the journey. That it just that happens, and you deal with them. You don't think about it. You don't hold any grudges or anything like that. It's just part of what the actual the environment is, and the culture, and whatever it is within AFL football. I don't watch AFL football at the moment because I don't think it's not that attractive to watch. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that the players that play today are really athletic, and they're better skilled than we were as players, but I just don't think the game is as attractive to watch as it was when I was playing, and probably changed over the last 10 to 15 years. So I got 2 younger boys, one's 13, one's 10. My 13-year-old, he loves his footy. He wants to play AFL footy. So I guess my love of football is watching them and just being involved locally. So if they go on to do anything from that level, then I'll get back into it and be passionate about it again. But I don't really watch much AFL footy at the moment.
Well, to have had 2 major knee recos and to have played 230 games and won a flag and represented your state's a super effort, and we appreciate your contribution, not just you, but obviously the Rice family with the son representing the club as well. So appreciate your time, and good luck with everything going forward.
Thanks, guys.